Creating a chart which visually displays your information is one of the best ways to show what you're looking at. Humans are primed to get their information from colour and movement, pictures, not text and numbers. So, first select the data that you want to display and then click on the Charts heading and then Insert Chart. I'm just going to start with the first suggestion, the clustered column. Notice down the bottom there is a Save as Template button. When I've created the chart and set it up to look exactly the way I want it, I can then save it as a template. So the next time that I need to do this type of graph on this type of information, I don't have to go through the whole process from scratch. So this is what Excel gives me. Wonderful, not. Click on the utterly incomprehensible chart and then right-click. Options open up. You can change the type of chart to any of the other types. Pie charts and line charts are two of the most commonly used. You can also format the chart to make things clearer. This chart has so much detailed text in it, the only way to make it work is to make it much bigger. But now it's covering up my data. One way to fix that is to put it on the next sheet. It will still refer back to the original data, so that if you change or even take away some of the data, it will reflect in the graph. So here it is on sheet 2. I simply clicked on it on sheet 1, selected cut, and then went to sheet 2 and pasted it. You'll also see a lot of formatting options have become lit up to help me alter the look of the graph. So now I've put the chart back onto sheet 1 because I want to show how taking some of the data out can simplify it and make it clearer. First, I copied all of the original data and put it down below so I don't lose it. If you click in different areas of the chart, and it selects it, and it also tells you what you're working on. So I click over on the left, that selects the vertical axis, which is income. Now, I've removed some of the data from within the parameters of the chart. First names, height, and for the moment, city of birth are really not germane to what I'm trying to show. So that makes the chart a bit cleaner. Then I selected the vertical axis and right-clicked on it to open options. I'm going to format the axis to change the axis from the default, which is 0 to 250,000. I'm going to change it to 50,000 to 200,000, and you'll see a big difference. So I clicked on Format Axis, and from the options on the left, I'm changing the scale. To change the scale, you can type in the figures you want, or click on Minimum and Maximum. Next, I select the horizontal axis, and I'll change the text, format it, to make it bigger, bolder, and easier to read. The horizontal axis is now clearer, but the names are a bit squeezy. If you click anywhere in the middle of the graph, in a white space, you'll get what's called the plot area. I'm going to grab those blue handles and resize it a bit to spread the names out. That's looking better. And now, as the income is in both the main legend up the top and up the vertical axis, actually spelt out in the numbers, I don't really need the legend on the right. So I click on the word, and you see that the grab handles become active. Then I just delete and it goes away without affecting any of the rest of the graph. Just a reminder, this is only affecting the look of the graph, not its content. A chart about income should have dollar signs, shouldn't it? It makes it crystal clear. So anything you do to the original cells will show up in the graph. Formatting the cells in column G to reflect dollar value shows up immediately in the graph, and I also make the graph figures bold. So this graph is now much clearer but still fairly traditional. You can show the income figure right above each blue column. It's called the data point, and you can dispense with the grid lines and the vertical axis figures altogether. Now, many people don't approve of dispensing with the grid lines or the vertical axis, but it's a matter for personal decision. So let's see how that looks. By double-clicking on the graph to make it active and then just hover the mouse over any of the blue lines, it shows the data point associated with that column. Clicking once on any of the blue columns will select them all. I'm going to show the data labels directly above the columns, and as I said earlier, I'm going to get rid of the grid lines and the vertical axis. So right-clicking on the blue columns, this is the dialog that comes up. I click on Add Data Labels. So there they are. I'll bold them too. Now to remove the grid lines. Hover your cursor directly over a grid line and then right-click. Don't worry, the delete refers only to the grid lines. And if something goes wrong, what do? Control Z. Grid line's gone, and so is the vertical axis. I don't need it now with the data labels over the columns. I selected the data labels in the same way by just clicking on one of them, which selects all of them, then right-click and Format Font. So I made the labels bigger and bolder. We're nearly there with a big clean graph which states the information clearly. A couple of the names are squeezed together, and so are some of the labels above the blue columns in the centre there. I'll click on the graph again in the plot area and just spread it out a little sideways to fix the names. So as you can see, I've clicked back into the graph to make it active, and then just once in the white area, which is called the plot area, and now we have grab handles. I just need to pull the grab handles on the sides to spread it out a bit sideways. The names and the data labels will spread out a bit more, so they're easier to read. Names spread out, check. Data labels, ditto. Now you can also grab each individual data label and physically move it around. Start by clicking just once on any of the data labels. That will select them all. The next step, then just click once on the data label you want to move and drag it into the position that you want it to be in using the mouse. If you then click on another data label, Excel will just grab that one, as it's got the idea that you want to move them around individually. That's very cooperative. If your data is not as straightforward as the data that I've been using, it can be very handy to have a trend line. They're very popular on, for example, the ABC News Finance section. So I clicked in the blue columns, right-clicked, and selected Add Trend Line. The basic trend line is just a thin black line, but you can jazz it up in a number of ways. Trend lines always start in the lower left and go to the upper right, where it's a rising trend. Now I'm going to use some actual real live data to quickly show you how it's done for real. From the Australian Bureau of Statistics, I just selected Hobart and then clicked on one of the subsets of the data that they collected in the last census, namely religious affiliation by sex. And it looks like this. You'll see that it's pretty dry and it's hard to read. They use Arial font size 8. It's tiny. You can actually open one of their spreadsheets, copy the information and paste it into one of your own spreadsheets to format and make charts from. So here it is now in my own spreadsheet. If I quickly format the width of the first column so we can read all of the text, enlarge the size of the text so it's easier to read, it will look like this. Okay, so I put it in size 16. That's a whole lot better. Now I'm going to remove the totals within the list and those two headings of Christianity and other religions. They have no data next to them and they will interfere with my sorting and my charting. First I'm going to chart everyone, no gender, and their religion, and I'll use the type of chart called Exploded Donut. That's pretty. You can see that Excel helpfully highlights the columns I'm using to make sure that I understand exactly what I'm charting. Unfortunately, again, it pops up a really small chart that can't show all the varieties and doesn't show the numbers. Expanding the graph until it can show the whole legend, and then hovering the mouse over different segments to look at them in more detail. What I see is that the three biggest segments are no religion, Anglican and Catholic. I can always add the data labels. Ew, messy. I can then delete one by one all the data labels for the very small parts of the pie. Their colours make it clear enough. So now I have an attractive, clear graph that shows the following. There are many adherents of other religions than Christianity in Hobart. There are more people of no religion than Catholics or Anglicans, and there are more factions of Christianity than any other religion, and so on. Now, for interest's sake, I'm going to do two charts, one for males and one for females. This time I've chosen an expanded pie. You don't have to stick to the layout Excel recommends either. I'm going to put the legend underneath the pie rather than beside. So first, select the pie, click on it. You get a border around it, grab that border and drag the pie up towards the top of the chart. Then select the legend in the same way and drag it down to the bottom. You can then spread them both out to your satisfaction so that the chart looks the way you want it. Now, to me, that's easier to understand. You see the little line connecting the figure 25,444 to its segment. I dragged the label off the segment to make it easier to read, and Excel just wants to make it crystal clear that this number belongs to this segment, so it puts that little line between the two. So that was the males. Now I'm going to save this as a template and then do the same for the females. Way back, I mentioned saving a chart as a template. Once you've fiddled with the chart to your satisfaction, if you like the result, and you know you're going to be doing more of the same type of chart, saving it as a template is as easy as right-clicking, selecting Save as Template, and then giving it a name. So using the Control button, I selected the females and all the religions with over 1,000 adherents, as I did for the males. For starters, they're not exactly the same as the males. Then I selected the chart button as shown. Under Other, you will note that the slider on the right is not all the way to the bottom. If you go down to the bottom, there is the template that we saved earlier. So just by clicking on that template, I now have another graph, which is basically the same as the last one without needing to do lots of tedious fiddling. I had to add a data label next to the light green segment because the affiliations are not the same for females as males. The template makes work a lot easier, but it doesn't always get it right. I needed to fix the colours on some of the sections so that they corresponded more closely. So looking at the two graphs side by side, females on the left, males on the right, you can easily spot that. There are approximately the same number of Catholic males and females, and ditto for Anglican. Fewer females than males, stated no religion. Fewer females than males, stated religious affiliation not stated. And last of all, these graphs would have been improved by a legend at the top of each graph, males and females. Here's a tip. Putting legends in after the fact is much more difficult than doing it at the start. To do it at the start, make sure that you include the legend males and females in your graphing process. The quickest and easiest way I found to do it after the event was to insert some clip art into the males chart. When I had it placed and formatted how I liked, I simply copied it and then pasted it into the females chart, altering the text and changing the colour. Much better to have that legend in from the beginning. Inserting the legend after the fact was done by selecting Insert, then Picture, then Word Art. So Excel deposited this great Your Text here, right in the middle of the chart. You click on that, getting the box around it with its grab handles, and then you simply move it around, resize it, etc. So I moved it, selected the text with the mouse, and then right-click again, and you can resize, change the font, the colour, etc. as you wish. Between using the mouse to drag things around and your arrow keys to move around in the document, right-click to open up options, drop-down menus under File, Edit, Insert and so on, and of course your keyboard shortcuts, Excel has so many options and ways to do things that you can truly customize it to suit yourself. You just have to experiment and practice.